This video is for the self-installation of the 1500 MX mill. You could have ordered the base machine, or you could have ordered multiple accessories. We will cover as much as possible in this series of videos, and for your convenience, we've included the chapter marks in the timeline below. Before you receive your 1500 MX mill, you should download the operator's manual and read through all the warnings and cautions. Some parts of this installation are hazardous, and you should take all the warnings seriously. Before you even order your mill, you should still download the operator's manual to look at the space requirements. In addition, you can look at the air and power requirements to see if you need to make upgrades. You can get to the operator's manual by going to Tormach.com, clicking on the support drop-down, then going to mill support. From there, the 1500 MX mill should be near the top. Next to that is the Documents tab, and from there you can download the operator's manual. Once you receive your mill, transport it to its designated location with the pallet jack. Make sure to place the pallet jack at the rear of the machine to prevent tip over. The pallet will be marked for the correct lifting location. Also make sure that there's plenty of room for the coolant tank at the rear of the 1500 MX. Use a razor to remove the packing material. Then do a quick inspection for any shipping damage. Remove the crate's top beam with a cordless drill. You will need to use a cordless drill that has a Phillips bit. Then start removing the screws from the crate's side panels, starting from the bottom up. Have an assistant hold on to the side panel and then to take them away. Go around the machine removing them in order. Remove the plastic cover up and over the mill, followed by the accessory boxes on the pallet and on the table. This is a new pallet design to make the install simpler. There is a horizontal board attached to the pallet with lag bolts. Use an impact driver to remove these. Pull the board off. At each leg, use a wrench to remove the top nut securing the threaded rod to the pallet. Lower the rod until it gets close to the floor. The accessory boxes will contain the 3 foot pads for the mill. Slide each underneath the threaded rod so that the socket aligns with the ball. Lower each foot until the top of each rod is flush with the pad. Make sure that the 3 pads are lowered evenly so that the machine is not tipped. Use a wrench to lower the threaded rod until it starts to lift the mill off the pallet. Pallet should start to come free. Continue these steps for the other 2 legs. 2 of these legs are harder to reach, so it will take some time. Once you raise the mill off the pallet about 1/4 inch, replace the top nuts. Then you can start removing the boards around each leg with a drill. Once all of these boards have been removed, then the pallet can be pulled out from underneath the mill. Now you have to raise the rods with a wrench to lower the mill. Take your time, going around to each rod, raising it slowly. About 4 or 5 turns each. If you raise them too quickly, you run the risk of tipping the mill. The current design of this threaded rod needs a wrench to raise them. But if you receive a mill that has a threaded rod that has a bolt head on top, do not use a drill or impact driver to raise them. If you raise these threaded rods too quickly, you run the risk of tipping this mill, causing injury or worse. Only use a wrench or socket wrench to lower this mill slowly. Near the base of the rod are 2 nuts with a thick washer just above them. A large black spacer with an opening on one side sits on this washer, and it will be securely held in place between the washer and the bottom plate of the stand. On each leg, raise the nut under the washer up about 1/4 inch, or 6 to 7 millimeters. Then place the spacer on top of this washer. Do this on all 3 legs, and then go around to each, raising the threaded rod slowly until the spacer is securely retained between the bottom of the mill and the top of the washer on the foot. Then securely tighten the top and middle nuts on each leg. Your mill will now be secure. So that the chip chutes fit over the coolant tank, you have to make sure that the bottom of the foot pads are at least 5.5 inches high. If not, add some space between the threaded rod nut and the middle nut. Make sure this is even on each leg. The table is secured to the mineral castings with 2 brackets. Now is a good time to remove them. Once off, reinstall the screws. ATC installation. Before we get to the installation of the enclosure, we will install the ATC, as it's a little easier at this point. If you didn't get the ATC, you can jump ahead to the chip tray and enclosure install around the 9-minute mark. Remove all the contents from the ATC boxes and set them aside. This will include the electrical cabinets, arms, accessories, and the hardware for the installation. In the hardware package, find the 2 slide pins with the flat sections. Secure these by hand into the 2 threaded holes shown here on the machine column. Note that there are 2 sets of mount locations on the machine column. You need to use the lower pattern to attach the column mount. They don't have to be tight, just aligned horizontally. Find the 4 thick washers and the M12 screws. Then place the ATC column mount onto the slide pins and start threading the screws with washers onto the column. Keep them relatively loose until you get all 4 screws mounted. Then secure them loosely with a 10mm hex wrench. You'll secure them completely later. The pneumatic actuator needs to be installed now. Place the ATC onto a table with the actuator. Then remove the first nut on the end of the actuator piston. Push the ATC head forward on the rails, then pull out the actuator piston. Place a piston onto its location on the back side of the motor head. Then secure the actuator in place onto the ATC rails with the 2 included screws, and using a 12mm hex wrench. Spin the ATC around so that you can see the other side of the actuator piston. You'll need to use a 13x16 socket on an extension arm to secure the nut you removed earlier. Now you have to remove the tilt bracket from the column mount. Remove the screws and washers with a hex nut and set them aside. The front one is a long screw. Also, there's one on the back side of the column. Take the tilt bracket to the ATC and secure it to the side with the included screws and washers. With the help of an assistant, place the ATC with the tilt bracket onto the column mount and resecure it with the screws and washers you removed earlier. Remember to secure the screw and the washer onto the back side of the bracket. Place a level onto the column mount and check for level. Then place the level on top of the carousel tray next to the ATC motor and adjust the tilt bracket until that's level as well. You're getting a level value on the column mount and trying to match the value on the carousel tray. You are not trying to make the ATC level alone. It's not a given that the machine will be level. Installing the ATC electrical cabinet. In the accessory kit are 3 M12 standoffs. These are secured above the column mount and into the 2 top holes, and then the 3rd into the bottom hole towards the rear. These can be finger tight, but later you may need to loosen them. Find the 3 cables needed to control the ATC. Place the EtherCAT, power, and the IEC cable through the column hole. Then through the column to the other side. Then start securing them into the appropriate locations that are marked on the other side of the electrical cabinet. Now lift the ATC electrical cabinet and line it up to the keyhole slots. Be sure to raise the cables above the bottom standoff. You will have to line them up to secure the ATC electrical cabinet so that they're out of the way. If the cabinet doesn't secure onto the standoffs, take the cabinet off and then unthread the standoffs out slightly until the cabinet can slide back onto the key slots. Ensure that the cabinet is secure on the standoff grooves. Secure the cables that are routed through the column from the electrical cabinet into the AC outlet, ATC communication, and ATC STO connector inputs. The motor encoder cable goes into the ATC column mount grommet that is closest to the spindle. If you install it into the grommet closest to you, it could get damaged. Feed the cable to the back and out of the hole on the top. The tray in and tray out cable goes into the grommet facing you. Feed it back and out the top hole. Secure them to the connections on the side of the ATC electrical cabinet. If you're just installing the ATC, we continue with the airlines after the enclosure install. So jump ahead to the 28-minute mark in the chapter marks below. Chip tray and enclosure installation. Before starting the installation of the chip tray and the enclosure later, you'll need a lot of disposable gloves. paper towels, floor protection, and denatured alcohol. Because to put this enclosure together, we'll be using Sikaflex, and it will be messy. Now this is very important. You'll want to install the enclosure first thing in the morning, as Sikaflex is very strong and only has a few hours of set time. By installing in the morning, you will have time to adjust the panels before the Sikaflex cements them in place. This is the first time my coworkers put this together themselves, so they wanted to experiment. On the right chip tray, they used a lot of Sikaflex and discovered that it was too much. By using too much under the table and way covers, the Sikaflex could potentially cause some binding issues. They had to do some cleanup to make sure everything could move freely. The method they came up with on the left chip tray and the rest of the enclosure worked very well, and we had only one very minor leak. Make sure you start by putting on some gloves, then take the panels out of the crate and unwrap all of them. If you purchase the ATC, it will have a notch panel underneath the foam, so make sure you set that piece aside. Cut a very small hole on the tip of the Sikaflex cartridge and insert it into the gun. We're going to skip the install of the right chip tray, but it is installed the same way as the left one. First, you'll have to make a good bead of Sikaflex along the small channel on the back of the frame. Then take some towels and clean off the excess. The channel along the y-axis will not need Sikaflex. Underneath that is the flat surface the chip trays will be mounted to. Make a thin bead along the top and bottom of the surface, being careful not to overfill. If any Sikaflex gets on the way covers, make sure to clean that off. Also make sure that every corner has Sikaflex. Then add 2 beads of Sikaflex on either side of each mounting hole. Then do the same along the front edge of the frame. Here we already have the right chip tray installed, so place the Sikaflex along the mounting surface and use a towel to smooth it out. Flip the chip tray over onto the floor protection and place a thin bead of Sikaflex onto the underside edge that will rest onto the channel. Do this along all the underside edges, then take a paper towel to wipe off the excess. The flat faces won't need Sikaflex, as that is already on the frame, but you do need to add some extra to the corner. Have a coworker hold the chip tray up while you start securing it with the provided button head screws and a hex wrench. Do this along the side, the front. Once you have both chip trays onto the frame, add the button head screws under the front way covers, and then along the front seams. There is one screw that is not installed, and that is along the rear flat face. The enclosure panel is secured to the chip tray and frame at this spot. Just make sure that there's no Sikaflex inside the threads. If there is, temporarily add a screw, which we found can be removed easily, as long as you do it within a few hours. Then add an extra bead of Sikaflex underneath both chip trays where they meet the frame. Don't forget to add that bead under the front seam and along the front. Also add some Sikaflex to the tip of your glove to add it underneath the lip of the front edge of the trays. Use a paper towel to smooth it out and denatured alcohol to clean up. Go back underneath the chip tray and slide the chip tray support into the grooves. Then secure it with some button head screws. Do the same on the other side. Sikaflex is not required here. The coolant chutes can go on now, but you will need to add some Sikaflex underneath where they touch the edge of the chip pan. Place one chute underneath and line it up with the mounting holes. Place some tape to mark the edge on the inside. Then add a bead of Sikaflex along this edge and along the bottom and both sides. Then on the other end. Return it to the chip tray and secure it with the button head screws from the inside. Since these screws are going to sealed posts, no Sikaflex is needed. Clean up the excess. Do the same procedure on the second coolant chute. The front edge of the chute has 2 sections of metal that are welded. You may want to add a thin bead of Sikaflex along this on both chip trays. After you get the Sikaflex on, make sure to clean up with the denatured alcohol and some paper towels. Assembling the enclosure. Now we move on to the panels. Only one bead of Sikaflex is needed on the outside edge of these screw holes on the rear mineral cast. Though we filled in this channel earlier, we added some extra Sikaflex to make sure it seals well against the panel. If you temporarily install that screw in the bottom corner of the mineral casting, make sure to remove it before you put the panel on. Then align a Sikaflex along the rear edge of the chip tray, and then 2 short beads above and below each screw hole. Find the rear enclosure panel with the notch for the opening for the ATC mount, and slide it into place. Start securing this panel to the machine column with screws, then along the bottom of the chip tray from the other side. If you bought the ATC, then that panel is on the bottom of the ATC shipping box. If you have that panel, secure it now. Once the panel is secure, add a bead of Sikaflex along the mineral casting where the panel is attached, and then along the rear along the back side of the chip tray. Sikaflex is very messy, so you want to keep cleaning up with denatured alcohol and wipes. We use around 8 boxes of these wipes and a lot of nitrile gloves, so you want to keep a lot of these on hand because you're going to need them. Go to the opposite side of the mill and start adding Sikaflex to the machine column just like before. If you secured a screw in the back corner, then you should remove it now. Then add Sikaflex along the top edge of the rear chip tray and around the screw holes. Then slide the rear enclosure panel in from the far corner and angle it into place. Secure it with the screws into each screw hole along the inside and back, sealing up afterwards. Go along the edge of this panel in a rectangle and then add lines between the screw holes. Then along the top of the chip tray, adding circles around these screw holes. Bring the side panel in with the help of an assistant and slide it into the bottom corner between the chip tray and the rear panel. Secure it along the bottom and side. Wipe down any excess. Go to the other side of the mill and add Sikaflex along the inside edge of the chip pans and the rear side panel edge, just like before. Have an assistant help you slide the side panel into place. And secure along the top and the bottom. Wipe off any excess. Adding the front panel. Find the rectangle front panel and approximate where it will lay in the enclosure. Set it aside and start adding Sikaflex to the lower left side, filling around the screw holes. Do the same on the right side. Then add a bead of Sikaflex along the front inside edge. Smooth it out with a glove finger. Add Sikaflex over the front lip and along the right inside edge. Smooth that out as well. Bring the front panel into place and secure it with button head screws. Make sure you keep cleaning up with paper towels and denatured alcohol as you go. Add Sikaflex along the inside edge of the side panel and between the screw holes. Find the right front panel that the operator console mounts onto and flip it upside down. Add Sikaflex along the bottom where it will rest on top of the rectangle panel, and then along the back edge. Smooth it out. Rest it on the rectangle panel and slide it over. You may have to lift the top right corner of the side panel to fit it into place. Secure it with the screws and then wipe it down. Do the same procedure on the left as you did on the right. In this case, we brought the top corners up against each other to push them back and then push the bottom into place. You may want to try this on the right side. Secure it in place with the screws along the outside and then on the inside of the panel. Installing the top panels. You'll need a ladder to install the top panels, but there is no need for Sikaflex as not much coolant reaches these areas. Simply place the right and left panels on top and then secure with the button head screws. Note that the left one is completely flat while the right one has channels that face up.
How much German torque you want on this?
German torque?
Good and tight.
Good
Yeah.
night. That's a good one. I like that. Door installation. Find the top linear rail with the bracket on one side and slide it into the enclosure. and fasten it to the two top panels using 12 M6 screws. There are 4 linear guide blocks. One set of guide blocks is enclosed, so set those aside. Remove the film off of the open set of guide blocks. Find 8 M5 screws in the provided bag. Then flip each open block over and install 2 M5 screws into 2 holes. Slide these onto the rail with the open end up and the 2 screws toward the front. Carefully tilt the bottom of the door toward the right side of the machine and into the enclosure. Then, with the help of an assistant on a ladder, slide the screws into the keyhole slots and tighten these screws. Install the remaining 4 screws into the rear holes. Find the bottom linear rail and slide the 2 closed guide blocks onto the rail. The 2 linear rail supports require M6 by 1 inch screws. These are used to clamp them onto the rail. Loosely secure one support onto the rail. We did notice that after removing the labels on this rail, there was some residue, so clean that off. Then install one support into the enclosure, making sure the clamping bolt is facing up. Slide the rail onto the installed rail support, then secure the second support onto the enclosure. Line up the door to the bottom linear guide blocks and secure with screws. If you have the metal panels in place of the side windows, you may want to remove them for easier access for the next steps. Start by removing the gasket and all the screws, then lift them up and out. If you have the windows, just raise them and secure with the enclosure window pins. There is a long thin panel called the Enclosure Door Overlap Extension panel. Bring this into the enclosure and install to the left inside edge of the door with some M6 screws. It's not exactly clear here, but he's reaching in through the open window area of the door. Up on top of the door, thread in 2 screws near each linear bearing block. Then slide the bearing cover panel into the notches. Tighten the screws. Slide the enclosure scuff guard onto the lip of the door opening and secure with 2 screws. Installing the door window. Install one short window clamp on the bottom of the window opening with 3 M6 by 12 mm screws. Then a long window clamp to the left of the opening. Keep both of these loose for now. Remove the window film off of the enclosure window and slide the window into these clamps. Make sure it won't fall out. Install the second long window clamp, followed by the short one. Then tighten all the screws down, but don't over tighten. Once the window is in place, it might be easier to tighten the side window clamps from the left side window opening. Install the door handle using 2 M6 by 12 mm screws. Now, if you haven't already, go around the mill and tighten all the panel screws, from top to bottom, including the linear rails and the door. Install the door latch. Assemble the door latch manual override into the door switch bracket and secure with 4 screws. Secure the door switch on the underside of the top right panel with 4 screws. Attach the door switch bracket to the door switch plate with 2 M4 by 8 screws. Then attach it to the top of the door panel with screws. If the door needs to be aligned, which it does here, loosen the door latch bracket. Close the door and then make adjustments so that the latch bracket lines up. Tighten up the screws. Now, to check alignment, you have to close the door, but the 1500MX hasn't been powered up yet, so the door will latch shut. To unlatch the door, reach into the hole next to the label that says Door Latch Manual Override. Inside there's a toggle switch. If you flip that, the door will open. Install the 3 grommets on the open holes of the right enclosure panel. Install the door latch push button. Find the door switch wire harness and route the white indexing end through the grommet on the side of the door switch brackets close to you until the end of the black indexing connections are next to the switch. Connect those black connections to the mating connections on the door switch override wiring. Seat the door switch push button into the opening in the right front panel, and from the other side, secure it with the panel mount nut, which was removed off camera. Align the indexing tab to the back of the push button and secure it once the tab snaps into place. Use some wire ties to attach this wire harness along the inside of the front panel. The machine door control cable is snaked down into the electrical cabinet from the top of the cabinet cable pass-through. Open the electrical cabinet with a hex wrench. Insert the machine door control cable into the connection labeled XS6 machine door. Installing the LED lights. The LED lights rest into the cutouts on the top panel. Secure the lights with the 2 window retainers by adding screws from underneath. Route the wire harness through the channel on the top panel, and then out the back. It will be connected later. On the left panel, slide in the LED light with the cable facing towards the spindle head. Tighten up the M6 screws. Connect the light extension cable to each light and route the power cables towards the back of the enclosure. At the back, the enclosure light power outlets are under a cover. Remove the screws securing the cover with a 3mm hex wrench. The energy chain may be in the way as you remove the screws. Plug in each of the cables into the outlets. Installing the air gun. Find the air gun kit and the chip tray center kick plate. Remove the red plastic caps out of the regulator. The pressure gauge and the push-to-connect fittings will fit in these spots. Wrap thread seal tape around the threads of the pressure regulator gauge. Then secure it into the pressure regulator. Install the larger push-to-connect fitting into the outlet side of the pressure regulator. There are arrows on the regulator that point out the direction of the airflow. Then install the smaller fitting into the opposite side. Find the straight push-to-connect fitting. Fasten the fitting to the kick plate's tab using the flange nut. Tighten the flange nut using 2 19mm wrenches. Remove the plastic nut off of the pressure regulator. Fasten the kit's pressure regulator to the kick plate using the regulator's plastic nut. Find the 2 airlines included with this kit. Connect the short airline between the open fitting on the regulator and the straight push-to-connect fitting that's installed on the kick plate. Connect the long airline to the inlet side of the regulator. Find the coiled airline, and if it has a Euro fitting, which looks like this, cut it off with snips. Attach a kick plate to the chip trays using 4 M6 by 12 screws. Attach the coiled air line to the push-to-connect fitting underneath the kick plate. Find the air gun holster assembly and attach to the right front with 2 M6 by 12 screws using a T-handle hex wrench. Assemble the air gun using a wrench, then attach the male end of the coiled hose onto the air gun's quick disconnect fitting and stow the air gun onto the holster. Route the air supply underneath the chip tray to the rear of the machine. Then remove the black manifold's guest plug. Then connect the air line to this manifold's push-to-connect fitting. Install the grommet covers on the rear, right and left side of the enclosure. Both will be removed if installing the washdown bars. Continuing the ATC installation. To access the ATC, you may want to completely remove the 1500MX's metal side windows, or raise the clear windows up and secure those with the magnetic stops. Connect the red air line labeled tray in to the push-to-connect fitting on the pneumatic actuator closest to the spindle. Feed it through the grommet and through the ATC mount arm. It will come out the rear of the arm. If your mill has a plastic plug on the end, just pop it off with a flathead screwdriver and feed the air lines through the hole. Connect this air line to the tray out solenoid. Connect the black air line labeled tray out to the push-to-connect fitting closest to you on the pneumatic actuator. Then feed it through the grommet and through the ATC mount arm. Connect it to the tray-in solenoid. Connect the air line labeled blaster to the rear of the ATC motor arm, through the ATC mount arm, out the rear of the arm, and then connect it to the air blast solenoid above the other two you just installed. Remove the gas plug on the remaining open valve in the manifold. Then connect the air line labeled air input to this, and then connect the other end to the push to connect labeled air input. Find the mount gap plate. Install it from the outside with two M5 button head screws. Assembling the operator console. The first step in assembling the operator console is attaching the hinges to the back. Place the operator console face down on a table, being careful not to rest it on the knobs. Adjust the hinges so that they sit at a 45-degree angle. Then place the box sleeve face of the hinge, or the side with one knuckle, on the back of the operator console. Secure each with two M5 by 0.8 screws, which are different from the enclosure screws. Have an assistant hold the operator console up to the front right panel while you secure the lid leaf hinges with the M5 screws. Open and close the operator console a couple times. Remove the 3 screws on the side of the operator console to access the interior. Put the screws aside. Attach the barrel connector to the controller and run the power brick through the rear opening. Plug in the power brick's extension cable. Place the brick into the opening of the front panel. Plug the controller data cord into LAN 1. Do not plug it into LAN 2. This is reserved for hardwiring your controller to your local network. If you want to do that, this is a good opportunity for you to run it to the back of your machine. Run the access cable through the rear opening. On the operator console's rear panel, unscrew the cover of the emergency stop connection and secure the cable to the e-stop connection. These 3 cables then need to be run up through the top opening of the front panel. Feed the operator console cables through the channel on the top right panel and out the back. Connect the controller's extension into the electrical outlet, followed by the communication data cable, then the emergency stop cable. To make it easier to reinstall the top electrical cover, slide a screwdriver underneath the energy chain to lift it up and out of the way. The side of the electrical cover lays out the correct location for each cable, so make sure these are all in the right location. Align the cover and reinstall the screws you removed earlier. Remove the screwdriver. Install the console cable cover onto the top right panel with one M6 by 40 screw. This secures the cable from the operator console underneath. Install the mouse pad panel to the side of the keyboard tray with the 2 screws pre-installed on the panel. Find the keyboard and mouse, then route the USB cables through the cutout to the operator console's display. Place them on the console tray. Connect both to the USB ports. Remove the window film off of the touchscreen. Find the Wi-Fi dongle and connect it to the front of the operator console. Place the operator pendant onto its bracket. Then align the data end to the connection on the back and secure with the screwdriver. Bundle up any loose cables from inside the operator console and secure with some wire ties. Close the operator console's front panel, then secure it using the 3 screws you removed earlier. Cut off the safety tag on the electrical cabinet's power switch. Then cut off the electrical cabinet's shipping straps. So that's it for this part of the install of the 1500 MX mill. In the next video, we will continue on with the coolant tank. As always, you can rely on the operator manual for detailed instructions. In addition, you can always contact our customer service team. Thank you very much.